apologies today. And we'll just, have we got online?
Councillor Carey's not doing that. It is ready.
So while we're waiting, any declarations of interest for today's agenda? Anything? No? And we don't have any public forum today, although we do have an observer. So let's move on to the community grant scheme policy. Would the director like to make any comments about the report?
Through you, Chair, it's discussed with a number of councillors, etc., and hopefully we've captured that discussion, but happy to answer any questions around the draft policy that is in front of you at the moment.
Any questions? I have to say I was surprised to see that we didn't have the words regional in our original policy, which any of you who've been on that committee before, regional is certainly a component of the grant scheme in the past. Yes, Councillor Griffiths.
Through you, Chair, just a question to the director. So have we always just decided internally that that regional local split was done then?
Through you, Chair, it's historically, and I'm going back probably before my time, there was some funding for local and there was some funding for regional. Somewhere along the way, and it's not clear to me, it got merged together and they were treated as one.
So my only question would be that we will not fund wages and salaries. I'd like to just question how we arrived and why did we say wages and salaries are excluded?
At the beginning.
So has anyone got any thoughts on that one? Or can I propose that we remove that from the will not fund? Councillor Bentley?
I haven't got a view too much either way, but the rationale I imagine was that historically, if they were coming to us for grants for wages and salaries, it was just a sign that they weren't necessarily sustainable, otherwise financially sustainable. And it was the view of the committees at the time that it wasn't going towards what we wanted it for. It was sometimes just giving someone a job rather than helping those in need. So it was a view that those things should be self-funded and then the grants money goes into what's actually going to help people.
Councillor Carey has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Wasn't on the wages and salaries. My hand was up already around the priorities in the last bullet point, where organisations that have a wide reach within the community and are a single provider of the service. And I question why it needs to be the single provider or sole provider of a service.
Yeah, through you, Chair, the idea was then is there are some organisations, and Wellington Free Ambulance springs to mind, Lifelike Trust, that are the only providers of that service in the region and indeed within our community.
Councillor Swales, Carson, and then Holderness.
I have to agree that I don't think waivers should be in there as an option or the ability for them to actually claim that, because the point of this is to actually look at added value that they want to bring to the organisation, an enhancement, buying new equipment to add value to whatever their core business is already. And I think that that's actually a better focus than actually giving them the ability to apply for wages.
Could I just respond to one thing you said there about
Absolutely.
buying equipment? Purchase of capital items and capital projects. it's an exclusion.
And yet it said somewhere here that they would look at how they added value to their service, and sometimes capital expenditure is. So there are some points in here that actually do contradict.
Director, any comments on that?
Through you, Chair, the capital items, etc. Most of the capital items tend to often be for quite large amounts of money, and often are from educational providers or others that have other sources of money. And then some of the other priorities potentially don't lead themselves in respect to providing for community groups that in turn provide for the wider community and for those that are potentially not as well off in the community. Capital items don't fit into that priority.
Okay, councillor Carson.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the wages and salaries, there are actually a number of funders now that will provide wages and salaries, and they are the Lotteries Commission as the big provider, and TG McCarthy Trust has 3 levels of funding now. And also on capital projects, Hatmana Travel Trust now only does capital projects, and also TAB New Zealand will only do capital projects as well. So they're beginning a number of grant providers that are starting to specialise in particular areas. So I think there's enough opportunities out there for organisations to tap other sources of funds, which was the other point here, was to be able to demonstrate they have tapped other sources of funds.
Yeah. Okay, so Your Worship. Oh, sorry, councillor Holderness.
Thanks. Through you, Chair. I just wanted to go back to councillor Kerry's point about the single provider of the service piece, because I understand about things like Life Flight and Wellington Free Ambulance, but if I'm thinking of things like people who will come to us for funding now that the sustainability stimulus grant has gone, so people like Pest Free and that kind of thing, there might be different providers who provide a similar service but have a different focus. I'm just wondering if there's a danger that they won't get funding through.
Through you, Chair, one of the considerations when this was discussed was around empowering the committee to determine
Okay.
what fits and what doesn't fit, and what they can do within the amount available to be distributed, and the number of applications and what's been applied.
Your Worship.
My position hasn't changed. Look, have faith in your fellow members, sit on that committee and let them make a decision. They'll review those as they go through and give them the power to make that decision. And all the time that this committee sat, and many of you have been on that, there's never been issues. So my position is let your fellow councillors who sit on that, give them to make that decision.
Having said that, Your Worship, are you then generally supportive of the proposed change in policy?
Well, my position hasn't changed. My position is option 1, status quo.
Okay, councillor Carey, I think, has a further comment to make or a question.
I was just going to say I generally do support the change, but I also in support of the mayor's comments there. I think the committee would make the right decision. That single provider just does stick out to me as unnecessary. Like in my view, it's who's doing the right thing and providing value, and there might be two very similar charities that you'd give to both. So I'd recommend a removal of that the word single in that line.
Councillor Bentley, then councillor Swales.
Thank you. Chair, I agree with the mayor that I think the committee tend to get it right, but from my time on the committee's also wanted more guidance in terms of a clearer framework for making decisions, and less this seems like a good project, bit of a clearer guidelines to where money should be going, especially as a new member of the committee. When you go in, you think, was this good or not? Is this what we should be funding or not? So I think option 3, is what I'll be endorsing. Take it away, because we could kind of rework option 2 here today and everyone add in a bit and take off a bit and change wording here and there, but if we're not happy with it now, I'll be going for option 3. I don't think it has to be a major rewrite, right, but just give clarity and a bit of guidance onto what our priorities are, especially with the sustainability grant being discontinued and us encouraging people to look at that avenue. It's going to get a whole new influx of different applications that will kind of throw out the committee a bit to what they should be focusing on. I think if we can tidy it up, that focus will be good.
So can I just clarify then? You're saying a major rewriting of the policy as opposed to option 2?
Yeah, I don't like option 2. I don't think that the draft amendments what is needed. So I'm saying option 3 isn't.
Major rewrite.
Well, it doesn't have, as I said, it doesn't have to be a major rewrite, but I don't want to be sitting here today and us all chipping in on option 2, but we're not happy with it as it is. So I'd just say, take it away, make a few more amendments, because I don't think it's fit for purpose. It's actually providing any major guidance on what priorities are. And there are things in there I just don't agree with, so that's why I've opted for option 3.
Okay.
It's not going to be a 20-page document. It's going to be a couple pages. But yeah.
Councillor Griffiths.
Wales. You said Wales. Anyway, I'll go. So we workshopped this a couple of weeks ago, and we spent quite a bit of time talking around the ideas that the mayor's had from his point of view with leaving it alone and letting the committee that sits on that make those decisions. Having sat on that committee for quite a while, I agree, but it is quite an onerous task. It puts a lot of paperwork in front of whoever's on that committee, and if there was a way of thinning the criteria or making it more agile, I would be for that. I didn't really want the option 3 of a major rewrite, but listening to my colleagues around the table, number 2 isn't going to do what we need it to do. 1 leaves it exactly where it was, which seems a bit pointless in the major rewrite. I'd support maybe removing the major rewrite and calling it a rewriting of the policy and coming back with something rather than a major job, just a short. Similar to this, but with a little bit more work involved.
Yeah. So through you, Chair, it's the idea of having the workshop was for officers, i.e. myself, to get a little bit of a steer of what was required. What I think I am presenting here is the feedback that I got and we agreed upon in that workshop. We can delay it, certainly, but there is quite a little bit of angst and questions from the community as when are these community grants going to be available and when are they going to be opening? So that will just delay that process for some time.
Councillor Swales and then Wheeler.
Thank you. Look, I just want to I've never sat on either of these 2 committees, right? So this is from an observation outward looking in. So having always sat on the economic stimulus package and the sustainability packages from the time of the inception, what was always helpful for us that sat on us, because we were given the delegated authority to make those decisions. So from that perspective, I support his worship saying that you need to trust the people that you've got on those committees. But what I found really helpful, and hearing what my colleagues are saying around the table, if you have a matrix like we used to have with the sustainability and with the economic development, it would certainly make it easy for those 3 elected people around the table to weight it in. I mean, I'm sorry, to be intimidated by a pile that big, that was quite normal for the sustainability and quite normal for, if we're paid to do a job, that's the job that we have to do. But it certainly made it easy, having that matrix. Now, that matrix will help you weed out the chaff from the weeds and give you some insights of the criteria that we have collectively given you, or the policy that we've given you to make those decisions. And that's all I've got to say.
And if I could just add, the importance to me from the other perspective of those who are applying is to try and make it clearer so that people are not wasting their time putting in an application which is way outside the ballpark, and yet there is no weeding out, councillor Twales, of whether people meet any kind of criteria. We see every single application, regardless of whether it's for 40,000, that's way out of the ballpark. So that's why I'm proposing that we do actually have this to put out to the community, to give them some of a better steer as to what it is we're looking at. And I think that the priority list, it doesn't say that that's in a particular order, it just says the priorities are. And so I would be proposing that we do actually just put this out there, get it out there, and allow the community groups who are desperate to know when we are going to open the fund, that they can get their applications in a timely manner. Councillor Wheeler, and then we'll call it close.
Thank you, Chair. So we had the workshop, and we did talk about things like ring fencing certain applications, which obviously the appetite wasn't for that. And we weren't happy with the status quo. So the idea was to actually tweak criteria, and we all most of us came to a consensus that that's the way we wanted to go. We weren't talking about rewriting a whole policy, or we're talking about tweaking what we had. So I'll be voting with what the director's got at option 2.
Okay, so do you want to?
I'll move but are we going to actually vote on options here, or?
We put one up.
Well,
Yeah, put one up,
I'll
say which one.
option 2, I'll move.
I'll second it.
Councillor Bentley.
If we're going to look at option 2, and I've got a lot of questions on it, I don't think it's the purpose. Again, back to the single provider of the service and wide reach within the community, that line. A lot of these kind of charities that came to council didn't have a wide reach. They focused on a niche. And that's the ones that are actually quite successful. They just focused on a niche and looked after a certain vulnerable group. They didn't have to be out getting everyone involved. And the provider of the service, we have several examples of people who do cross over, but some who do some things a bit better, and we saw value in that, and some who did another part of the service better and saw value in that. Yes, they crossed over, but to say one was better than the other would be false. They just had different specialities. So is that going to say that those people wouldn't both get funding? But it's thrown back to the committee, so I just don't know why it's even in this.
But then we get back to the point of the 3 people, councillors on the grants committee, have use their discretion, etc., working within this rework policy, which is option 2, to make those decisions. So it doesn't preclude any organisations, and it doesn't necessarily include various organisations. I think that it's clarified what in my mind was too brief a policy and was too wide and didn't give enough direction to something now that sets, here's the 5 priorities, and here's the criteria, and here's what we won't fund. And it's quite clear then to the committee then to make the decision. So it doesn't exclude anyone, and it doesn't necessarily include everyone. So I think it's quite flexible. If you're going to go for option 3, then my suggestion is that you still open up the grants funding soon as using the old criteria, and next year have whatever new policy is. But we shouldn't delay opening up the grants funding for 24-25 year at all. So in my mind, therefore, the only option is to go for option 1 or option 2, and I prefer option 2.
Councillor Holderness.
I think I'm agree that the policy as it stands currently is too light and too broad. I don't generally have a problem with the option 2 policy, apart from that last bullet point in the first priorities piece. I think I like the fact that what it clearly states is in terms of not funding these things. So I think that that's helpful in terms of policy. If you wanted, rather than having a rewrite, as per option 3. What we could do is get the policy out there, something that looks a little bit like this option 2, if we can agree on something, but then potentially come out later with guidelines around how to implement the policy, which might be a little bit more clarification and could include a matrix like you're talking about, Councillor Swales, and then have the guidelines which show how to implement the policy, but keep the policy as per option 2.
So if I may, Chair, so the 5th bullet point under the priorities, why not just end the sentence after community?
I think that's a good idea. That might get rid of some
Might get rid of
objections.
Councillor Bentley. Okay.
So can we,
I'll move the amendment.
okay,
Second,
Seconded by Councillor Kerry. Yeah.
okay, all right. So we have got several recommendations here. Let's take them one by one.
Do we vote on the amendment first, Chair?
Do we?
Yeah.
Okay, separate each other.
Yes.
Yep.
Organisations that have a wide reach.
So he. Full stop, full stop. So councillor Bentley is proposing that we delete the priority list that says organisations that have a wide reach within the community, full stop. So
So
all those,
delete the piece of the single provider within it.
Yeah.
all those in favour of that?
Aye.
Against? Okay. So let's go back to the other recommendations. So we've got receives and notes the report type of community grant scheme policy. All those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against? The Community Grants Committee meeting scheduled 5th of September 2024 will be rescheduled. All those in favour? Aye. Against? And that approves the Community Grant Scheme policy with the minor adjustment that we've just talked about, option 2. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No. Record it, please.
Recorded. Councillor Bentley, Your Worship. And authorises officers to correct any minor typographical and formatting errors that may be identified. All those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against? Oh, okay, let's move on to the proposed partial revocation of the recreation reserve next to 63 Black Beech Street.
I know.
General Counsel, anything to bring up there or
No.
highlight?
No, thank you, Chair.
Any discussion?
Happy to move.
Moved.
I just have, sorry, have a question. So should we not get the dispensation for allowing this sale to go ahead? Or my concern is the timing of this, because we're saying in this paper that they'll have to remove the shed and things before we can make a decision to sell. But if we're going to sell it to them, why do they have to remove those things? Because then they're only going to have to, I mean, it just doesn't make sense in the sequencing of how I read this, that, you know, if it goes ahead, they're going to, before we sell it, it's got to be a clean piece of land.
Yeah, my understanding is it's actually it's a shed that crosses the boundary of the bit of land that we're going to
Yeah.
sell and
Yeah.
the bit of land we're going to keep.
Yes,
So we wouldn't sell them the bit of land that we're proposing to sell them,
right.
where they were then still encroaching.
Okay.
It's just that they have a,
It wasn't that clear, council, so
sorry about that.
thank you for explaining that to me.
And
Actually, so if you look at the diagram sites here, you can see at the very bottom of the encroached area, there's a collection of 3 sheds.
Yeah.
And one of them sticks over.
yep, councillor Griffiths.
While you're talking on that, through you, Chair, and then there would be a setback from that boundary anyway, wouldn't there?
Well, the normal.
Councillor Carson?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just wondering on para 33, where the purchase price of 13,000 springs from, comes from.
Through you, arrived at by valuation back in the mists of 2012.
So are we bound by that? Sorry, Chair, are we bound by that or it has to be updated?
No, we're bound by that, and it is actually, prior to uncovering the historical agreement, we were getting ready for a new one, and the more recent valuation was less.
Okay, so does someone want to do the recommendations? Councillor Bentley, are you moving? And seconded by His Worship. And we've got 4 there. Can we take them all together? Yeah, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, it's carried. Okay, Director's Report, Planning and Regulatory Services. Does the Director have some updates or anything to provide us with?
I do, thank you, Chair. I've got a number of them actually, so I'll reference the paras and I'll try to do them in order in the report. Just at paras, to start with, obviously the paper was written some time ago prior to the preparation of the agenda. Paras 6 in relation to RPS change 1. Officer understanding is that the paper has gone up to Regional Council where they have reaffirmed their intent to progress change 1 to RPS. And in more detail in response to questions, but high level comment is, and that is despite the issues raised by submissions such as Park City Council and other TAs around the region on the level of discomfort with central government policy direction, for example, Indigenous biodiversity. In a similar vein at para 11, really the same point. This is in relation to the to the NRP, and that's plan change 1. And again, a same point, officers' understanding is that the Regional Council has reaffirmed the intent to carry forward with change 1 to NRP. And the example there in terms of discomfort with central government policy direction is fresh water and the proposed removal rather, of the hierarchy of effects at the resource consent stage. And essentially what that is the Regional Council wanting to take forward plan change provisions that has been odds with that direction. Again, an update, just a general comment in relation to paras 15 to 25, and that's the regional program paragraphs. I just wanted to just make an overarching comment there, a pan comment. Just across, again, those paragraphs are obviously just setting out a variety of things happening in the regional program. There are a number of issues through those various parts of the program that we're just, in the normal course of our BAU operations, we are reviewing those in relation to what those parts of the regional program are progressing, developing, or in some cases having adopted, and how that related to the rolling sequencing of central government policy, particularly in relation to RM reform, our remaining obligations under the RMA while we're awaiting the broader reform, and the regional plans. And an example of that is we are looking at a question raised by a community member in relation to flood extent provisions in our plan, and that's just something that we're working our way through. In relation to paragraphs, I'm sorry for so many updates, paragraphs 30 and 31, this is the section about central government RM reform. Specifically, paras 30 and 31 are in relation to the resource management, freshwater and other matters. Since the paper was written, the submission was submitted, and today I spoke with the Primary Production Select Committee on that matter, and I guess by way of summary, the focus of that submission and really just the focus of the points made to the Select Committee were really around trying to daylight some of the practical realities in our complex operating environment. Just one example is the proposed 3-year delay on the requirement to identify new SNAs, and really just illustrating those points to the Select Committee that the stated intent is a 3-year delay, but in fact the timeframes are not actually 3 years. And regardless, even if the Amendment Act as it's drafted, that progressed as written into law, this council, like other territorial authorities, would still have other obligations that without amendments to the rest of the RNA and in this region, some of the regional plans, we would still have obligations effectively for SNAs. SNAs by other names, and that is Section 6 in the RNA puts a matter of national importance on us as a territorial authority to deal with essentially SNAs. And in this region, Policy 23 of the RPS actually requires that we reflect SNAs admittedly by another name in our district plan and the regional plan. So I guess the overarching point through that submission, and again just emphasised with the select committee today, was just while the intent is clear of the amendment bill, in practical reality, there is a lot of tension that exists, and specifically for us in this region, we have provisions from the regional council that are at best uncomfortable, some might say at odds with central government direction, regardless of anyone's view of that central government direction. And so what that means for the policy environment, so both for the community in terms of what we're dealing with, but certainly practical level around resources, we continue to be put under pressure to respond to central government to deal with regional plan provisions and have this tension, and what that leads to for the community is confusion and potentially wasted resources. So those are my answers, Chair. Sorry, quite a few.
Well, I must say it is a very, the length and the depth of the report obviously makes it clear that resourcing is a significant issue. Councillor Bentley.
Right on to my question, Chair. Just the para 15, the growth framework projects that UPA's planning staff are involved in. How much staff time is taken up by those?
Through you, Chair. To give you a specific answer, look, and I'm happy.
Roughly.
Yeah. Look, I'd say at any one time we would have we'd have parts of 2 staff operating across that program. To be frank through you, Chair, we've dialed back our resourcing in that space simply because we just need to prioritise. You know, really, as we've spoken with you all through workshops and here to the there's a lot on our plate, and we just simply have to decide what is the most important thing. And obviously, a rolling review of our district plan is our first priority. And we've had a lot of clear feedback from the community across a number of plan changes, and yourselves have given us a clear direction around trying to be clear in a pretty complex environment with the community. So we really have dialed back that resource. I would say at the moment, there's really not a lot of resource, but historically, it has probably been perhaps a quarter sort of FTE on and off over weeks at a time.
Worship.
Just now, I accept that when we're talking about 15 through the staff time, we pull back. But the problem is, we need to make sure that other councils, because otherwise that goes on regardless, and we have to face the consequences. That if you like, the loonies carry on, and effectively. Yeah, so it's a matter, I overseas it had some issues, so it's a matter of, because looking at the least recent that's come across my desk, it's, even they've been told to pull back, life goes on, so it's just an issue for all of us.
And Chair, if I can comment to that, look, I certainly don't want to leave the committee with the impression that we're sort of hands off and not doing anything, which I understand is not what you're making here. Look, certainly the team broadly speaking, in earlier times have heavily participated and really put in a lot of effort to try to change some of that. And there has been some frustration about the extent to which some of those things have not been reflected in final versions that have found their way to the leadership committee. And I guess what I would say is, look, we've pulled back our resourcing, but we've tried to work a little bit more efficiently through the regional planning managers group, and just trying to sort of triangulate our resource with other TAs to sort of work smartly across the regional program.
Councillor Carson.
Yep.
exactly my viewpoint on the Wellington Regional Growth Framework projects. It's a self-licking ice cream. It's an industry for consultants and staff who have nothing else to do. So, you know, I'm highly against this. One example is, look, disappeared there. No, I have to do it again. One example is the regional, come to me in a minute, or was it 15, wasn't it? Was the regional future development strategy. Okay, so it's required to have a national policy statement, but it says the implementation plan expected to be approved in June 24 and its anticipated review of the future development strategy will commence in late 25. It's a job for never ending. Then they're going to probably have to review the implementation plan in a couple of years' time because it's out of date. What a lot of nonsense. And what benefit of all this is to Upper Hutt? I mean, sure, because I know for the fact that Upper Hutt is rarely mentioned in these strategies at all. So be very wary of putting too much resources, but keep an eye on what's going on. I think we should be voicing our criticism of a growing industry here.
I think Councillor Carson, well, a lot of what you're saying there, I would agree with, but I think that the Mayor's warning is that if we don't keep an eye on it.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. We need to keep an eye on it. All right. But can I have another question on that? Regional future fund. What's the coalition government's view on requiring a national policy statement on urban development strategy? Is it coming out with a new policy statement, national policy statement, or what?
Through you, Chair. I'll also roll that question up another level. So that is what we sort of collectively call national directions. So these are the national steer, whether it's national environmental standards or national policy statements, of which that is an example that you're talking about here. That is one of the areas in this rolling RM reform program that has been really unclear, and that has been, and I've heard feedback from yourself and other members of the committee, time and time again around obviously the frustration of that rolling review, but there is also some sense of picking off some of these national directions, and Paris 30 and 31, that's a good example of that in relation to fresh water, which I appreciate is not the national direction you were talking about. So I guess the simple answer is we keep tracking, we keep trying to make this point, and the submission that, the last submission that was made on freshwater and other matters made that point again, and we're consistently making that point that we would suggest that there's a lot of merit and efficiency pulling together all of the national directions, because inconsistency is a really high risk.
Okay, I have a question.
After you.
Yeah. So today, the minister said that he would be visiting the regions. But aren't we a region? But we're not listed on that list of regions. I didn't quite, because in a way I feel as if we've done some good things as a region, and yet that doesn't seem to be on anyone's radar outside of this region.
Through you, Chair. Look, I apologise, I haven't seen that. That might have been perhaps when I was doing something else this afternoon in the select committee, but I hadn't seen that point. But I wonder whether if the emphasis was on regions, yes, we are a region, of course. We're a tier 1 authority, and I wonder if there's been some focus there around non-metro regions. But I'm sorry, I think for the minister.
Okay. All right. Oh yes, Councillor Swales.
I have a number of questions and I'd like to put them one by one instead of bottling them all together and then maybe missing out, because I intend, So when I go to the status of the changes in the district plan.
Will you do them by paragraph number? That would be helpful.
Well, I can give you a page, 24. It's status of changes to the district plan.
Yeah.
Chair, one of the annexures, attachment 1.
It's an attachment 1.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
something.
I just wanted a little bit of clarity, because on the 19th of June, we had a report from council or from our legal counsel that plan change 49 is not compliant in the terms of the time frame of 2 years from notification to making a decision on the plan change. I come here and I look, and this is a more up-to-date one, saying that the request has been made to the Minister for the Environment for an extension for the time frame to make a decision on plan change. Have we received that? And if we have not, what are the consequences of not having heard that or got that?
Through you, Chair. Just to make the point, and that is right, until we obtain that extension, that status is correct to identify it as a non-compliance, so I just want to make that point. Yes, that has been made. The last update from Ministry for the Environment is that we should expect that extension this month, so the month of July. So we don't yet have it. As to the question around consequences, there are no consequences from a financial perspective, but obviously it has a procedural risk. And so that is why we continue to engage with the ministry to try to obtain this from the minister.
Can I continue? So with regard to that, we've made this application quite a while ago and it seems to just be going on and on. A lot of decisions when it comes to the RMA have a closure of a timeline. Why does this not have that?
My interpretation of what happened here was, and you may recall, we sought an extension in relation to the IPI as well as Plan Change 49. The IPI was my observation of this is it appears that it was prioritised, obviously, before the change in government, because that had a shortened timeframe. My observation of this is it's just because it is a standard plan making process, it's fallen in the queue and it's just simply been caught between the change of government. So that's the best observation that I have. I'm sorry, I think there might have been the second part to your question.
No, that's fine. Thank you for the answer. So we're looking to have some outcome with regard to that plan change where the commissioners will have something to come back to us.
Absolutely. So that's an item that we are critically chasing. That's something that the policy team are very lively aware of, as is naturally the panel and obviously ultimately up to council.
If I could now go to the summary of the Wellington Regional Climate Change Risk Assessment, and that's on page 26, but it actually addresses all of the paras that the director mentioned with regard to that. And I do support what His Worship said, that you've got to be careful even though you wind back. Some decisions are made without you being at the table, and the consequence of it, because we pay into this, is that we actually have to, or unintentionally obliged to do whatever the general consensus is, because we are tier 1. But one of the things that I want to ask is around the built environment on that very first table. And I have to admit that you directors are certainly increasing my knowledge with regard to where I have to go and to find out what an AEP was. If you want me to read these reports, I really need to know what those things actually stand for. Otherwise, why bother even putting it in front of me? So that's just one thing that I'd like to make a comment. So having found out what an AEP is, yes, please. So when we look at the Pine Haven stream in Upper Hutt, and we look at, and I'm asking this from an elected person's question around the table. So when we look at what regional council are looking around flood mitigation and that, and we look at what the general standard is, and we look at what an AEP is for number 1 and how many years we're mitigating for that, that's a 1 in 100. And then we look at a 1 in 5, which is 20%. So I'm assuming that the 1 in 4% is a 25-year period that we're looking at, is my first question, or 20, yeah. So with the mitigation of what's happening, that modelling was done quite a long time ago. Is it still relevant for today with regard to Pine Haven, knowing that it is a project that has gone on for a number of years? We've always had the the issue around funding of that. So is that modelling appropriate for today?
And I alluded to that matter in my opening comments, actually. Look, to answer that question, if I'm able to start a little bit further up the food chain, obviously everyone on the committee is aware we do a rolling review of our district plan. And so we always need to look at the sequencing of that review. And in amongst the things we need to consider is the urgency of those provisions and the currency of those provisions. One aspect of those provisions has been raised by a member of the community, emphatically over the years and through a variety of processes. And so I have asked the team to review those particular provisions in amongst partly in response to those questions raised, but partly in response to where it's currently sequenced, because they're relatively recent provisions, but of course they are based on the evidence base, which is the regional council modelling, which were conducted, yes, some time ago. So my answer to that question at this point is we have just commenced a piece of work where we will explore that with the regional council. And to do that, I want that to be a comprehensive piece of work. We were working with our infrastructure colleagues, and that's the intersection of how do we rely on that modelling for a range of things, whether that's projects or whether that is also plan provisions. And equally, a bit like the HBA modelling, they are a point in time and a projection in time. So I can certainly sit here with confidence and say that all operative plan provisions have obviously been through those processes that are robust, and with some exceptions such as IPI, they otherwise have appeal rights to those provisions. But I have asked the team to explore that, and the way that we will do that is we'll engage with the regional council and talk with them about where is their modelling, where is that programmed, and our ability to check that our district plan programming matches their regional modelling program, because obviously, and I'm mindful if we go back in the report, we've looked at the regional program around climate resilience and so on. We can't just look at that from a pure planning policy perspective. We have to look at that more broadly. So if I may, Chair, I'd like to come back to the committee and answer that question, but simply say that we're working through that.
Okay. And my other concern is when we hear back from the commissioners around Plan Change 49, Variation 1, and Plan Change 50, those decisions, whatever they are, not that I'm trying to preempt them, will have some sort of reflection on this particular topic that we're talking about, depending on wherever that lands. And the other thing that concerns me is that we're putting an awful lot of money into State Highway 58. So why have we identified that Cross Valley link as an issue that we need to mitigate when we're actually investing millions of dollars like we did with the transmission gully? That I find that it's interesting that we've identified it as. Is it because it's the only east-west that we've got at the moment that they've identified it, or?
Chair, through you. Can I clarify whether that's a question around, I may call it this, satisfaction with the outcomes in the regional program?
Yeah, it is, because I think that they've identified a number of things that fall in the context of Upper Hutt that have an impact on us, and yet regionally, through the road, regional road transport, they've invested money through Waka Kotahi and those partnerships to invest there. So I'm not quite sure why we're relitigating it and putting it there. And the only thing that I can think of is that it's because it's the only east-west, but then they've identified Tony Granada.
Through Chair. I would just simply say that there are a number of things that have ended up in those regional documents that are things that officers of this council have raised and sought that they are not included. Look, I would need to check whether that particular matter was something raised. I'm happy to take that as an action. But I would say, I guess that is both the benefit and the tyranny of regional partnership programs, is that we don't necessarily like everything that we see in those provisions. And I'm not sure that answers your question, but I'm happy to come back to you if you want a specific answer about the feedback we've provided on that.
Yes, absolutely. And I've just got two more questions. And it's about the built environment and it's about waste minimisation. And when I hear that a council just south of us have given a rising sea level that is going to happen in the next 50 years, why we're investing so much money in waste, particularly at Seaview, and yet it's not identified in here specifically, but they become quite specific about State Highway 58 and other things. So why are we not addressing that as an issue that is going to come when we're the taker of the council that's just been told that climate change is going to have, or rising sea levels are going to have a huge impact?
Through you, Chair, I'll interpret that as a question.
It is.
Around, around, well, I'll go back a half step. But as the comment I just made, there are things that exist in these regional documents that are not necessarily the way the elected members of this council may like them to be, but equally also that maybe contradict feedback that council officers have provided through those processes. I will take an action and I'll make a comment. I'll take an action just to confirm the kind of feedback that we provided through that process on that matter. And actually I'll refrain from making a comment on that.
So my concern is, and it's going back to what His Worship said, that, and it's contrary to what my colleague Councillor Carson said, if you're not at the table, then you cannot influence some of these things that are gonna, at the end of the day, have us put our hand in our pocket. So they've already landed, you know, the housing projections for us, and if central government are going to pick that up, then that has an impact. They're looking at the economic overlay for the tier one, which we are, all of those things. So I appreciate what you've just said, Director, about, you know, prioritising things like that. But I would not like to see that we're actually not at the table influencing some of these decisions that will feed in to, you know, maybe a regional or a local plan or something like that. But where are we at with the fast, you know, track legislation that's going through? Because that could have an impact on some of our housing developments.
Yes, through you, Chair. I'll answer that question and answer that back once it's look, simply waiting for select committee to report back.
Yeah.
Everybody in the committee sort of tracked very strong feedback. I guess there's been some signal within this, but really we're just waiting for a report back. So
Okay.
Back once you know that. As to the point around, look, I absolutely hear that. If we're not at the table influencing, then, you know, we'll be the takers of what falls out of these processes. Two things. We have, as I've indicated, we've taken a mixed model of heavy participation, sometimes with great influence and other times not. And in some cases where we've sought certain things and they just simply have not been reflected. You know, one argument could be that, as I said before, is the opportunity and the tyranny of sort of partnership with a collective that's, you know, some overs and some unders. I guess the other question or comment I would make is perhaps the committee may want to give us a bit more of a steer then on some of that prioritisation or some of the issues of interest, because you know, I'll be direct with the committee. We don't have endless resources in our policy group. We will have to not do certain things. And I'm very mindful that our community has been great at giving us really clear feedback and saying where we've either done a great job and often where we haven't, you know, despite our best efforts. You know, and I can easily cite PC50 as that's an example where the community were frustrated and communicated with us clearly about that, and yourselves gave us a steer of the expectations. So we do still have to make choices about our resources, and I am mindful that I have really strong memories of the team putting in a lot of effort in this regional program and still seeing things that we were not happy with. And so if we heavily invest in that program, which we can, we will have to stop doing some other things. And you know, it could just be as simple as slowing down the rolling review. But it's, if I use one really current example, that, you know, the further submissions on Plan Change 50, and there are many, and the team are, you know, at last count 24 hours ago, sort of 2/3 of the way of download and reviewing, and it's heavy going work. It's pretty labour intensive. So I'm absolutely hearing that message about if we're not at the table, but sometimes when we are at the table, it's also difficult to influence as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Just to note, everyone, Councillor Carey's had to leave the building that he was in, so he's not with us at the moment, and he will try and find another room. Just going back directly to your question, just sort of acknowledging where you say perhaps you're wanting some prioritisation from us.
Chair, I guess I'd say that I believe we are selecting the right mix, but the committee may feel that we're not. And if there was a feeling, and there was, you know, if the committee wanted to indicate, hey, look, please be very aware that these particular issues are really right at the top of the list of priorities, I'd happily take that and make sure that we really want to get that in our prioritisation.
Councillor Swales, is that something you want to drive forward, or?
I'll take it offline with the director and his worship, yep, and the CEO.
Okay.
Well, that's a decision the CEO will make.
Yes.
Mm. Yeah, okay. All right, Councillor Ultra.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I just wanted to ask the director about the national, page 23, the national policy statement on highly productive land. To me usually means food production. And it's also talking about using this land to enable more greenfield housing development, but also that same land is more likely to be valley floor, which is also more likely to be flood zone. And so I'm just wondering if you can give me any clarity around, because I thought the highly productive land was food production, and they're talking about housing development. And I mean, certainly recovery, yeah, from a whole lot of houses being flooded out is far worse than, yeah.
It's through you, Chair, please correct me if I've taken the wrong steer here on that. Look, in terms of that particular terrible bit, I'm serious, HPL, highly productive land. Look at you are correct in alluding to the tension that exists there around protection of essentially sort of food bowl soils versus other uses, in this case greenfield and so on. If I go back to Plan Change 50 in its original form when it was urban and rural, that started life, and obviously that already indicated very strong feedback from the community, because many members of the community put in a huge amount of effort to engage with us when it had its original scope. We had a number of central government policy directions that altered things, not least the changes in the highly productive land provisions. Now with the coalition government, we've had a signal that there will be some change, but the comment I made earlier about the broader reform program and the broader national directions, it remains very unclear to officers exactly how and when will it be a group of national directions, which would include something like this, or will this be carved off and be separate? And I guess we have a coalition government that has very clearly signalled, obviously, an interest in removing perceived barriers to housing delivery. And I guess I just simply note that that's just an inherent tension between productive soils. It is to the point around flood provisions. I'd just say, look, any plan change when it comes up ultimately to council, there's an evidentiary basis, there's an evidentiary process we need to go through, and we need to be able to deal with matters like natural hazards and flooding and so on. So I don't know if that's specific enough, but the process requires us to manage those things.
That's all true.
Chair, I just wanted to also add that obviously productive soils are also very highly permeable soils, certainly in comparison to a housing development. So and there are things that productive soils are treated in a way to make them more permeable as well. It's something that I think probably needs to be looked at in terms of flood protection too, where we need our permeable soils to be rather than building on them. So yeah, that was a concerning link. Yeah.
So any more questions?
Second.
Moved by His Worship, seconded by Councillor Bentley. All those in favour that we receive and notes the report. Thank you, everyone. Aye. All right, strategy, partnerships and growth. Would the director like to comment or highlight anything in particular?
Thank you, Chair. Just through you, 2 comments. On paragraph 7, just a point of clarification to avoid any confusion. The statement as the report is written around the 2 bylaws noted as being will be revoked would probably be more accurate to state would be revoked if they were not to be reviewed. So just to avoid any confusion there. And just a comment on paragraph 13. That we are still expecting the financial expenditure committee report back on that bill, which is due out tomorrow. And we look forward to looking at that and reporting back as required.
Any questions of the director on her report? I have no one else. I have one, and it's the gambling policy. And you're suggesting there that that's on hold. Is that a review that we could engage with external interested parties? Would that be helpful to us or useful?
Through you, Chair, there is an element of external engagement required on that work. It has commenced, as noted, with initial scoping of what is required. And I guess it has just been the nature of prioritising our current resource, hearing what my colleague has been talking about in her area. And so it is intended for the review to continue. It's just a matter of the timing of the next couple of months to determine how that goes.
Okay, well, if there are no further questions, who's moving? Councillor Bentley, seconded by Councillor Holderness. All those in favour say aye. Carried. Chief Executive's report. Chief Executive, do you have any particular things to highlight?
Thank you, Chair. Probably the biggest concern is the LGBT membership. For a variety of circumstances and a little bit of indecision, it's not clear where the council stood on this matter at the time numbers were put forward for approval in the long-term plan. And so funding for the LGBT membership subscription were not in the LTP as adopted. Having said that, if council were prepared to move a resolution to find the funding and pay that membership, I'm not sure that happens. And the reason that I've flagged it at this point in time is that the Local Government New Zealand annual general meeting is coming up. And in order to attend that meeting, which is being held in Wellington, and to vote on any resolutions being put forward to that AGM, LGNZ, Upper Hutt would have to be a financial member of LGNZ at that time. Now, of course, if you do decide to renew the membership, His Worship will need to determine who the representatives are from council attending that AGM, which I think has been a past practice. But we would then also need to very quickly circulate to you the resolutions that are proposed to go before that annual general meeting and get some feedback for the representatives who attend that AGM to help them make sure they vote in accordance with your wishes. So that's really the urgency attached with highlighting that matter. So I have not included a recommendation in the report, but would be more than happy should councillors wish to do so at this point in time. There's a bit of commentary on the Three Waters reform. The other key item in here, I think, is in relation to the Trentham Racecourse Infrastructure Acceleration Fund. Our other partner to the deal have decided to pursue the funding, which was a relatively small proportion of the total investment in this project, was not, their reading of the market was that it's not the right to proceed this development in accordance with the original timeframes. And so they have elected to pull out of the agreement, which then makes our participation in it somewhat redundant. So we have done the same. And that is, I understand, now up on the website, where they've recognised that this particular project is no longer proceeding. I would have to say that out of a significant number of projects that they have needed to go forward with, in the 30s, very few of them have actually proceeded. So this isn't the first one not to have proceeded. There is a little bit of commentary in here about, so we're still working our way through that. Still not entirely clear what sort of position we should be bringing back to the council on this matter, but it is something we're actively working on, and it is a growing risk to council and council staff in particular. Some of the feedback that we get through our social media platforms. The speed management rule. The minister is currently, unlike other things, this is not an open process, and the minister has called it, but we know very much the minister's already made up the minister's mind. And so really any feedback will only be influencing things around the fringes. But one of the key challenges for setting speed limits in the future is going to be to prepare a full benefit cost analysis to show what the economic return from any speed reduction may be. In some instances, that will be relatively simple to do, particularly if there is an accident history, but in locations where there is no history, that is going to prove problematic. And at the moment, NZTA are also consulting on a refresh of their policy for emergency works. That is going to have significant impact for all councils. At the moment, if, for example, we were to be hit by a flood event, The restoration works of our road network would be subsidised at 90%. The proposal is that this comes back to councillor's point about AUP, it's return event in simple terms. Anything that has a return event of less than 1 in 25 years is only likely to be funded at our current funding rate of 51%, instead of currently up to 90%. So this is going to, I think this cuts to some of the things we were trying to achieve in terms of making sure that we have enough resilience within our financial our finances to ensure that should these events happen in the future, we do at least have some means to return things back to normality. That particular issue is generating an awful lot of interest from around the country. Really, it's I think if you look at Gabrielle, you look at the Marlborough flood events from a couple of years ago, these events are becoming extraordinarily expensive to build back from, and yeah, there really isn't going to be enough money to continue to get them at scale and getting the other driver behind this is that they want to encourage any build back to be done in a much more resilient way so that it does not reoccur. But at this stage, no indications to additional funding to help with that process. So yeah, there's an awful lot happening, unfortunately.
So, councillor Wheeler, lead us off.
I'll start it off, just with the local government, with two big councils going, Christchurch and Auckland, and a smaller one, West Coast, and maybe more to come. Just remind me, what's the benefit of participating as a member of LGNZ? Someone tell me the actual benefits.
We'll address that question to somebody who would like to.
I'm happy to answer from an elected person's perspective, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's good, because you have been to a number.
I've been to two and attended the AGM where the remits were discussed and we put our voice there. So when you're right, there have been a few councils that have decided that they don't see a value in it, but I've attended a all-day session on infrastructure just recently at Papa. It was one of the most insightful workshops that have ever happened. You had all of the expertise there and they were local people from Infrastructure New Zealand and places like that gave you an understanding of the work program that are there. So not only do they do that, but they also do training for new chairs, they help with assistance for induction. They also help with any assistance if you're rewriting your standing orders. There is a whole lot of back issue. And whilst you've got Auckland and Christchurch, which are bigger than the Wellington region, and we are not one voice, we are one of 9 voices, I think collectively we're not strong enough in a position to actually not be a part of a collective voice when we go to central government to talk to the ministers about things that affect us. Because, you know, we're a little council that has been plugged into a tier 1 position, which means that a lot of the decisions that are coming out of the beehive actually affect or whatever, as our CEO have said. So I think at the moment it would be for $42,000, I would rather invest it in LGNZ than to pay a similar amount of money to the Chamber of Commerce. The Hutt Valley Chamber of Commerce.
We haven't funded it.
No, but
we're not funding
yeah.
it at all. But I just remind councillors that we have not funded it,
Yeah.
and we've done the LTP, and I just, whatever you vote, be careful because the funding's in place, and you know, less than a few days after, a week after we've gone through the LTP, and there's a lot of restructuring going on, we're looking to put money back into it.
Thank you, your worship.
So just to carry on there.
Okay, and then councillor Bennett.
So in the region here, all the other councils in our region are participating. Yeah, because if you have one drop out, it'd be like regional amenities fund, we'll be last one standing, so. So if all the others are participating, then okay, collectively. But if you get one dropping out, next month they all start dropping out.
All still.
Councillor Bentley. Councillor Bentley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if there's been any signal from LGC and how they plan to refocus the organisation post Auckland and Christchurch leaving to be a voice of smaller councils rather than the whole sector. Has there been any signal there?
Through your chair, they've started that discussion. In fact, tomorrow there's a webinar on that type of issue.
Yeah.
I think, to be brutally honest, they probably made a mistake in terms of the Three Waters reform program of the previous government, where instead of becoming an advocate on behalf of their members, they became an advocate on behalf of
They did, I think. Yeah.
and I think they perhaps are realising that that was tactically the wrong thing to do. But look, we can only hope that collectively wisdom prevails and that there is a significant change in refocusing of direction.
Councillor Bentley.
I also support what Councillor Swales says about the other benefits of LGNZ.
Councillor Carson, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I'm not that way. I have another question though, but carry on the discussion, then I'll come back.
Okay. All right, councillor Ultra and then councillor Hammond. Is that?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering if we did decide to put that back into the LTP, where would the funding come from?
But through your worship, there is no mechanism to put it back into the LTP.
Sorry, Wayne, you're saying.
How do you know it wasn't the 4 years? Madam Chair.
You like the worship?
The elevator.
I did one moment, yeah. Carry on.
Look, I don't mean this in the way that it will sound, but the amount of money was relatively small compared with the overall budget. And I can't tell you yet where that funding will come from, but it will be found from within the existing budget. And it just means that perhaps we won't be doing something else or a couple of other things to the extent that we propose to do. And happy to report back on what that is once we've seen that.
Councillor Swale,
Yeah, I'm just rewinding a little bit forward ahead here. And when I think of the Finance and Performance Committee, where Kate comes and delivers all our carryovers. And I think that there are some of those carryovers that are pegged for a particular use and you cannot use them. But there are also carryovers of other things that we might be able to help the CEO should we decide to go with this. I think it is a little bit disappointing that it wasn't in the LTP, but I think to be the only one out of 9 in this area to say we're pulling out when we've always been stalwarts that have stayed there with regard to what Councillor Wheeler said about the amenities fund and things like that. And as Worship has always said, you need to be at the table or you need to support regional things. And this is another one of those things that I think we need to do. So I will be putting a recommendation in that we ask the CEO to find the 42,500 because it helps support our young elected members. It helps support our Māori members, and it helps support other members, women who want to get in. And there's certainly been some work, live webinars, whether you've attended them or not, about bullying on, women being bullied. So they do quite a widespread. So I will be putting a sort of recommendation if you find the funds.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
So really, the recommendation would be that we remain, the rest of us up to, we remain
Yes.
a member of Global Government New Zealand.
Yes, please, Your
Yeah.
Worship.
Anyone who's not spoken and wants to comment on that? Otherwise, shall we go ahead and put it? Okay, councillor Swales. I'll put the moving. Who seconded it? Councillor Bentley. All right, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
No. Record it, please.
Recorded. Okay, so that was carried.
Thank you.
All right, so any other items that we haven't discussed on this Chief Executive's, councillor Wheeler?
Just on page 47, Trenton Race Course Development. Just want to find clarity from council, the traffic modelling and assessment of effects. How much time and financial cost have we put into that?
Chief
Yeah.
Executive, yeah?
It's about to say through you, Your Worship.
Say it together.
Through you, Chair, the work that was done in relation to the traffic modelling was done as part of the broader update of the traffic modelling for the city. And there was minimal extra cost in doing assessment of effects for traffic modelling in the Trenton location. We had actually already identified that there were issues there, and so the work that was required to be done to do the assessment was very minor. It was also work that was funded from better off funding that came through on the previous year.
Councillor Carson and then councillor Hammond.
Could I please ask the Chief Executive what he meant by saying it wasn't the right time to proceed with the Trenton Development Project? And is the group still intending to go ahead with the Trenton Development Project?
The market's full.
No, because the reference was in terms of the application for the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund. And that reference is, my understanding was it's not the right time in terms of application for the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund. So could we have an explanation of what it's not the right time means? And also, does Mr. Gilly still intend to go ahead with the development project without using the Infrastructure Acceleration Funds?
Through you, Chair, the reason the original agreement required substantial development work to have taken place by 2027, and that would have included the CDA change and a significant build by that point in time. The assessment that was made by the developer was, and it comes back to the point that Councillor Bentley raised. Their assessment was, because it was a mixed style of development, it wasn't just all one style of development, that overall it wasn't the right time from a market perspective to commit to that 2027 deadline. They still believe that a concept similar to that is viable, but not within that time. So they couldn't meet the deadlines in the agreement, and so they decided to pull back from that agreement now rather than protract that involvement. In terms of whether or not they intend to proceed, that would now be a matter between the Gillies Group and I believe they had a vehicle within the Grassroots ownership model that they were going to work with in terms of future development on that site. And obviously our involvement with that at that point in time would really be more from a regulatory perspective in terms of through consenting or land use issues that may arise. In terms of the timeframe, they've not indicated as part of this process what that new timeframe would be.
Carry on,
Good
councillor
question.
Carson.
Do you think that the decision was also influenced by the review of Kaingora's financial position and the decision by the coalition government to actually consider having more input from private providers of social housing than Kaingora in the future?
I'm going to say that that is not a question I think that the chief executive should be answering in public.
Well, I'll ask the question in non-public then.
Can't speak for the coalition government either.
No, I'm not speaking, asking for the coalition government. I'm just
That's
asking
for an opinion, that's anyone's
Okay,
opinion.
any other questions of the chief executive? Oh, sorry, councillor Hammond.
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Lady Chair. Look, thank you. Yeah. Page 50, the Horowhenua District Council voted not to extend the alliance agreement with Downers. And means that they're going to take all their water delivery program back in-house. And they're saying that they could save 100,000 in the first year. 250,000 and 500,000 by year two. Have we and can we look at a model close to that for ourselves in the way of exiting through Wellington Water? Also, can we look at another option of perhaps looking at the plumbers that we have here, which are incredibly quiet, but are all well resourced and well trained, as to looking at bringing them in to do a program like this?
Through the chair, the Horowhenua situation was quite different to ours in that they had a direct contract with their previous provider. And it was a matter of exiting that contract, which they did by mutual agreement, and that contractor transferred their resources to the council, who then took over the management of it. And the savings that they're making are in essence the management fees that they were paying to that contractor previously. In our case, our situation is a bit more complex because we are part of a collective who have joint ownership of them. And that binds us through certain behaviours that we would have to exercise in terms of terminating that arrangement. And the problem that we have now, of course, is that with the review going on at present into the future of Three Waters delivery, that may be reaching a conclusion within the next 6 months. And that would probably mean that our current service delivery model will probably run out in the next 18 months or 2 years. So whether it's worth our while at the moment, even contemplating that exit process, it's a little bit debatable. In terms of your question around plumbers, I think Gunter at the bank there would probably have more up-to-date information than me.
Through you, Chair. So this has been raised a couple of times since I've been here, and we are working on this and looking to come back. If you recall, I did ask for an extension, just because I'm mindful of not mixing this up with the local water down well work that's going on as well. So I am going to come back and I'll be discussing it with council.
Councillor Swales?
My comment is on the social media risks. I think it's great that we've actually had this identified and are looking at a way forward with regard to how we handle some of the keyboard warriors that have had a huge impact on our staff. But it's quite, and I know, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but when I read the attachment 8 or the attachment here, and I look at all the other councils that have been as affected as our own council, and look at some of the steps that they've taken. And then I looked up the Nintendo because I thought, what is that? It wasn't a social media platform. And then when I looked at how many councils actually use it, I think it would be a good place that we possibly land on with regard to pushing our information out to those in our databases. I'm not quite sure how it works, but I'm sure the Director of Strategy, Partnership and Growth will have a look to see whether that is the best option when they're reviewing our social media take. But I just want to say that having brought this up, I just want to say that the staff have handled it really, really well with some of the scathing comments that came through in a time that we weren't the only ones going through making hard decisions. And I just want to say you handled yourselves really, really well. And I apologise on behalf of our community that they should not have made them so personal. It should have been, play the player, not the person. And in some cases, they didn't do that. So I look forward to seeing, I know it's operational, but I look forward to seeing where we go from here.
Thank you. Councillor Ultra?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about page 48, the speed management rules, and it's talking about the speed reduction works excluding the mandated variable speeds around schools. So I'm sorry where we're at with the speeds around schools.
The Chief Executive will answer.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Look, the Minister is, one of the things he's been very clear on is that he will only allow variable speed signs around schools. But unfortunately, he was meant to define what those school zones will be. So it's been a bit problematic to rush out and put variable speed signs in. He's also been reasonably clear about what he sees as being the hours of operation of those variable speed signs. But as I say, there is clearly, he has some clear thinking in his ahead of him, but he's just going through the process of assessing feedback before he makes those final announcements.
Thank you.
Councillor Bentley?
Do they provide any additional funding for the huge additional cost of doing fully variable signs at every school?
Through you, Chair, the government policy statement, which is indicating the funding levels for road control authorities, is due to be released virtually any day now.
Okay.
And that will confirm the amount of investment. But I can tell you that signals are that somewhat contradictory. The investment in road safety nationally will be down from what it has been previously. And how that flows across into the local government part of the budget, we'll see fairly soon. We've not had a heads up on that particular budget, but the one thing we have been told is that overall the amount of funding allocated to local authorities is that they're seeking approval from the Minister to drop it below the Minister's desired funding lower limit. And that would seem to be at the expense of any new or capital limits at this point. It is unclear. Well, as soon as we've got that confirmation.
Peter the people.
Okay,
Can I just, sorry, Chair, just want to say, I really like the submission that we've got in around resilience. I think it's really well put, our position, and they've articulated, you know, the underfunding with regard to maintenance and renewals and the burden that it will come on to us. And it also feathers into that conversation around adaptation, around climate change with the Wellington Regional Leaders Forum. So I want to congratulate the officers who put that together. It really reads really well, as do the other submissions in this paper. So thank you.
Yeah. There's just a massive amount of work going on.
Yes.
Priorities, all of them seem to be priorities. So let's move. Someone moving, councillor Wheeler, seconded by councillor Ultra. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
And against, it's carried. So we'll now move into public excluded, and I'll move that public be excluded. Councillor Brooker seconded. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, it's carried.